Hey there, and welcome back to another Marvel video. And today, I want to talk a little bit about the quality of the streaming TV shows that we've seen come to the forefront of the MCU since the beginning of Phase 4, starting with WandaVision at the start of 2021. And prior to the release of WandaVision, the MCU was primarily a platform for superhero films. That's just how the story was told. That's what people wanted to see. Superheroes on the big screen, blowing shit up and making wisecracks with great CGI and epic score and colourful and exciting characters. That was pretty much what the first decade of the MCU was made up of. Epic moments crammed into 2 hours of film. And yeah, there were TV shows as well. The Netflix shows, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Agent Carter, that kind of thing. But Marvel clearly always viewed them as the B division, the minor leagues. They didn't really play a role in the wider storyline and were kept in their own little timelines despite some of them, the best example being Daredevil, being absolute bangers. And that's honestly one of Marvel's best works, at least in my opinion. But still, they were considered minor leagues. And it wasn't until the rise of Disney Plus as a streaming service that we really began to see this perspective shift, because now Disney had its own streaming service. And whilst they did have a big back catalogue that would probably get people subscribing for years to come, they didn't become the top entertainment company in the world by just sitting there and coasting on their past success. They love milking every dollar from their franchises. And so to get people subscribing and to keep them around longer, they realized they need to start expanding on their franchises. And the best way to do that, to ensure that people stay for weeks and weeks and weeks, that's TV shows. Because they do keep people coming back, week after week. Mandalorian really started this trend for Disney, and it's brought about a new era for Star Wars, a franchise that really had hit rock bottom popularity after the rise of Skywalker. But now it's recuperating and rehabilitating its reputation. And so after that, well, Marvel needed to get in on that action too, and so they did. And they've gone pretty hard at it ever since. Seriously, it's been a year and a half or so since WandaVision came out, and since then, we've had Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, What If, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, Ms. Marvel, and now we're on the cusp of getting She-Hulk Attorney at Law. And all the while, Marvel's still pumping out feature-length films as well, so the MCU really has become bigger than ever before. And there really is a whole lot to love about this new era of Marvel, the TV shows especially, because for one, they simply give more opportunities for more interesting stories. I mean, there's only so many films that Marvel can release in 1 year, and they don't want to have these films competing with other Marvel films. It's just as simple as that. But because of this, because they can only have a few films released per year, otherwise they'll start cannibalizing their audience, they reduce their storytelling opportunities. After all, not every character can star in their own film, especially as the MCU continues to add more and more characters, but then want to show the old characters too. And so really, the Disney Plus original series provide that perfect opportunity to expand the world of the MCU without bloating the theatrical release schedule and forcing the studio to compete against itself for its own audience. It also helps to ensure that you get quicker continuations for various different storylines, because now characters can feasibly jump back and forth between being in the films and appearing in a show. Like Wanda. After Endgame, she had WandaVision, which set her up, and then she returned again in Multiverse of Madness to wrap up her current story arc. Without WandaVision, this arc would have felt incomplete, and her role in Multiverse of Madness wouldn't have made any sense. And it's the same with a lot of other characters. Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It sets up Sam's future role as Captain America, which is the more marketable title compared to Falcon, and thus makes more sense to show as a movie. But by having this show first, you get more of an emotional connection to his character, and his storyline feels more complete. You get to bridge that gap between Endgame and Captain America New World Order. Loki, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, Ms. Marvel, and now She-Hulk. They let us have origin stories for a bunch of new characters, or variants on new characters. Phase 4 was already chock full of these type of stories, but that was just in the film department. And so this gave more opportunity for even more. Because since Phase 4 has felt like it was building up for the next big era of the MCU, it meant that we needed more characters and new storylines. But as I said, only so many characters can have their own film, and thus the TV series gives that opportunity for the MCU to grow the franchise in a more natural and efficient way. Plus, I think the shows just give an alternate way of telling the story and really enhance character development and personal arcs. After all, the runtime of the shows usually significantly eclipse the individual films. And thus, we get more time with the characters. We get to see what makes them tick, their quirks, their relationships with other characters, how they interact with the world around them, more dialogue, more scenes, more of a chance to showcase what each character's about, more time to flesh out side characters and villains. And thus, I think it gives the opportunity to have a much more well-rounded experience. We get to see and learn more about each character. And that's honestly something that's a little bit harder to accomplish in the films, simply because of the difference in runtime. Furthermore, it helps in the origin stories especially, as we really get to see what this new character is all about, and they can space out the key narrative developments, like battling the villain and all the key elements that usually pad out a superhero film. And in those gaps, you can fill it up with more character-driven conversations and arcs that serve to flesh out the character even more than we're able to get in the film. So really, from this perspective, the TV shows on Disney Plus are an absolute win and serve to enhance the MCU in so many different ways. But of course, the video is titled The Problem with Marvel TV Shows, and thus I should probably go through some of the reasons why I'm starting to get a little bit concerned with the MCU, and in particular, the current crop of streaming series on Disney Plus. And we'll start with the issue of content bloat. And I'd argue that this is more of a general issue with the MCU, but one that's more directly tied into the shows. There's just so much content, like so many hours and hours of content that you need to try and keep up with, because you really never know when a character's going to appear. The MCU's become so interconnected and so intertwined that the best viewing experience is if you actually pay attention and keep up with literally every scrap of content, as you never know when something's going to be relevant. And that was all well and good when it was just the films. You could say, oh yeah, I enjoy going to see the MCU films, and that would be that. Every couple of months there's a new one to go and watch, and we can all live in peace and harmony. But nowadays, in those off periods between the films, and there's more films than ever before now, you also have shows to watch and engage with. Many of them with crucial plot developments that are going to be referenced later in interconnected storylines that bleed into the movies. So for the best viewing experience, you now need to watch these as well, which is fine at first. But eventually, these hours and hours of extra content do start to pile up, and that fatigue begins to set in. You feel that obligation to watch everything, because you don't want to fall behind. You don't want to not understand what the hell's going on in the cinema. You want to know all the characters. There's that big fear of missing out effect. And so keeping up with the MCU goes from a fun hobby where you get to go out and enjoy a new film every few months to a lifestyle choice where there's always something that you need to try and keep up with. And I do realize what a stupid problem this is. Oh no, a franchise I enjoy is making too much content. My life's ruined. How will I ever come back from this? The MCU is consuming my life. It reads like a Reddit shitpost or a bad copy pasta. But seriously, at a certain point, I feel like the content is going to feel oversaturated, and people are going to burn out. And when they burn out, they start to care much less about what's become the biggest film franchise in the world, and the most profitable one in history. And eventually, this thing is going to get too big, and it'll probably become a bit unsustainable. And whilst I don't think it's ever going to die, I mean, it's clear that at this point, it's become almost impossible to kill off mega franchises. Hell, even Lord of the Rings is coming back. And that felt like it had hit a complete and utter ending forever. And then on top of that, Game of Thrones has a spin-off, despite its terrible ending, and its lack of popularity these days. So, nothing is ever truly gone. And so the MCU is really not risking much, but I do think the more you flood the market, the less people will start to care. Plus, is it just me, or is the writing for these shows consistently quite hit or miss? Like, I've enjoyed all the shows, don't get me wrong, and I think the character arcs and the actual base elements of each of the storylines work really well. They've constructed some interesting characters and set the franchise up with some cool story threads and ideas to follow through with in the future. I'm not going to dispute that. But I feel like they have these really great intros to their shows, really great openings, great conflicts and characters and narrative, and then the endings are subpar, either due to the lack of episodes, and I mean, take Moon Knight, a really strong opening, a great hero, a great villain, a unique story. Then they set up this massive clash between the two avatars and the two gods, and then they rushed their way through it completely. Like they wanted to focus so much on Mark's backstory that they ran out of time to conclude the villain arc. And so he defeats him off screen during a blackout where his secret personality Jake Lockley takes control. And then let's take a look at Ms. Marvel. Once again, a lot of great character building and setup, only for the main villain to die quick as all hell in the penultimate episode, and the finale to have a new villain entirely, the American government. It felt like a massive tone shift that really would have benefited from extra episodes. And that's just two examples, but I think the majority of the Disney Plus series do this. They spend ages getting you invested in the story and the characters, only to run out of time and leave you unsatisfied, leaving you with that feeling of just wanting a little bit more, or feeling a little bit let down. And honestly, that's probably the main problem I do have with the Marvel shows. I always come away from them having enjoyed them, but feeling like they could have been better if there was more time to improve the pacing. And whilst this problem isn't one that's going to sink the MCU, I mean, I'm not a ridiculous doomsayer, I think it's still one that should be corrected, if only to improve the overall quality of the world they're trying to build. But anyway, with all that being said, these are just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of all this? Do you agree that the shows could be better? Or maybe you think I'm completely wrong? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.